Imagine a powerful socialite so obsessed with securing elite futures for her children that she calmly trades away 5 innocent lives without hesitation. Nearby, shop windows don't display fine fabrics or luxury goods, but funeral shrouds sewn together from human flesh, violating every ancient taboo ever whispered in folklore. In an economy where existence itself is the currency, it becomes impossible to tell who is the buyer and who is being sold. Our story begins in an isolated, forgotten village at the edge of civilization. Here lives Malin, a renowned author famous for dark mystery novels. Fans call her the soul scribe because of how completely she pours herself into her stories. Starving for fresh inspiration, she retreats alone into the wilderness, settling into a small cabin beside a colossal, ancient tree whose roots claw deep into the earth. Each year, as autumn draws its final breath, the villagers summon a shaman to perform a forbidden rite. Fresh flesh and blood are offered to the scholar tree, a sacred guardian believed to have protected the village for centuries. According to legend, this ritual has continued for over 1,000 years without failure. Until now. This year, no matter how desperately the shaman chants and pleads, the tree refuses to bloom. No fruit forms. No signs of life appear. Panic grips the villagers. To them, this is a warning from the gods, proof that something unforgivable has occurred. They rush to prepare an even greater sacrifice to beg for mercy. What they don't realize is that their village headman has already sold them out. Bribed by a ruthless land developer eager to build a luxury resort, the chief plans to erase the sacred land entirely. Under the cover of night, he sneaks to the tree and pours toxic chemicals into its roots, determined to kill it once and for all. But as he commits this desecration, his nose suddenly begins to bleed. Thick, warm blood spills down his face. Annoyed, he wipes it onto the tree's cracked bark without a second thought. And then something impossible happens. The dying scholar tree violently surges back to life, pulsing as if it has found a heartbeat. The chief stands frozen in terror, unaware that the tree is drinking his blood at an unnatural speed. Ghostly white pollen bursts from the trunk, swirling into his nose and throat, forcing violent sneezes. Panicked, he grabs his tools and flees. By morning, the tree has returned to its lifeless, withered state. But now the village air is thick with drifting white pollen, floating like a silent fog. From afar, Malin watches in confusion. When the dust brushes her skin, she sneezes sharply, just like the chief had. She brushes it off, assuming late-season blooms aren't unheard of. She has no idea this pollen has marked the village for death. Soon, the tree begins to twist into something grotesque, and fear spreads rapidly. The villagers become convinced the construction project angered the tree spirit, and they confront the chief. But he dismisses them coldly. "This land is mine," he snaps. "I'll do whatever I want." The argument ends in tense silence. As the chief storms away, Malin notices something horrifying, a swollen lump beneath the skin at the back of his neck, moving slightly, as if something alive is trying to escape. Shaken, she returns to her cabin and researches the history of the scholar tree. She uncovers an old record from 1994. The legends say when the tree blooms, it shields the village. But when it fails, its divine power is fading, and something far worse is awakening. Lost in research, she doesn't realize how late it's become until dusk settles in. Driven by curiosity and dread, she returns to the tree. There, embedded in the bark, a flawless white flower slowly opens, as if calling to her. Just as she reaches out, a man steps from the shadows, startling her badly. He mutters to the tree, claiming its spirit is already gone, that what remains is only an empty shell. Malin assumes he's unhinged. Wanting nothing more than to escape, she turns back toward her cabin. Then she stops. The forest path is completely covered in white flowers. The sight is disturbingly beautiful. Her writer's instincts ignite, and she lifts her phone to capture the moment. But when she looks at the screen, her blood turns cold. In the photo, beneath the flowers, lies a blood-stained skull. Her gaze drops from the screen to the ground, and there it is. A decaying body sprawled before her. Suddenly, the corpse's mouth falls open, releasing an endless cloud of white pollen. Malin doesn't hesitate. She runs. Back home, she tells her closest friend everything. The response? Laughter. Her friend brushes it off, claiming she's been spending too much time writing dark fiction. Desperate to prove she's not imagining things, Malin sends a photo of the area. Her friend replies seconds later. "I don't see a body," she says. "But what's that ugly bump on your neck?" Malin's stomach drops. She reaches back and feels it, a raised, tender lump. Hanging up immediately, she rushes to the mirror. For someone like Malin, her appearance matters deeply. Without hesitation, she squeezes the blemish. She has no idea that this single, careless act will mark the beginning of the complete destruction of her beauty and herself. At that exact moment, the strange man standing beneath the ancient tree seemed to sense a disturbance ripple through the air. In a low whisper, he murmured that the tree god's flowers had finally begun spreading, creeping along every path leading out of the village. Back at her cabin, Malin felt a sudden, searing pain explode from the lump on her neck. Before she could even comprehend the horror of a flower forcing its way out of human flesh, instinct took over. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed the blood-soaked, rose-like growth and yanked with all her strength. Agony ripped through her body. When she looked into the mirror, terror flooded her eyes. The roots weren't superficial. They were tangled deep within her muscles. This wasn't pollen entering a wound. Her entire body had become fertile ground, a living incubator for a parasitic plant. Overwhelmed by raw panic, she burst outside, screaming for help. Ahead, she saw villagers gathering and moving toward the ancient tree. For a heartbeat, hope flared. She staggered toward them, desperate for rescue. Then she saw the truth. Every villager had already been claimed. Their bodies stood upright, but their eyes were empty, movements unnatural. They were no longer human, only hollow vessels, puppets animated by the will of the tree god. In that instant, everything finally made sense. The 1,000-year-old tree truly had protected the village. But human greed, the willingness to betray their guardian for profit, had extinguished its spirit. And the moment that protection disappeared, something else arrived. The ghost market. Legends say that wherever human desire grows desperate enough to trade souls, the ghost market manifests. It always offers exactly what people want, but demands payment in what they cherish most. The villagers' greed had summoned it. The market had tempted them with wealth, luring the corrupt developer like bait. But the cost was absolute. Their lives were taken, their bodies repurposed as nourishment for the dying tree. Those snow-white flowers weren't blessings. They were markers, a sign placed upon prey. Realizing there was no escape, Malin dragged herself back toward her cabin. But it was already over. The pollen had rooted itself too deeply. Her limbs grew stiff, her movements sluggish, strings tightening around her body like invisible threads. She fought anyway. She clawed at the ground, leaving bloody streaks behind her, refusing to surrender. But resistance was meaningless. Her fate had been sealed long before she ever arrived in the village. She would become nothing more than premium fertilizer, fuel to sustain the ancient tree. By sunrise, the village had fallen silent. Not a single living soul remained. In their place, countless distorted faces were now carved permanently into the tree's bark, frozen mid-scream, their life force fully consumed. The scholar tree stood tall once more, alive. But its spirit was no longer pure. Blackened by human ambition and greed, it had transformed into a gateway, a living bridge for the ghost market, lurking quietly, waiting for the next desperate soul willing to trade everything for desire. Our next tale shifts from the wilderness to the concrete maze of Soul City. Meet Chiron, an ordinary office worker. Though others considered her attractive, she suffered from severe body dysmorphia. Her insecurities consumed her, especially her obsession with a tiny bump on the bridge of her nose. And the ghost market hurt her. One evening, walking through her apartment hallway, her attention was caught by a delivery box labeled Angel's Visage. She pretended to ignore it, but once the hallway was empty, she quietly stole the package from her neighbor's doorstep. Stealing wasn't new to her. But this time, something went wrong. Her neighbor, normally silent and submissive, came knocking. She demanded to know if Chiron had taken the delivery. Panic surged through Chiron's chest, but instead of backing down, she lashed out aggressively, forcing the woman to retreat. When the hallway finally went silent, Chiron exhaled in relief. She checked the peephole. A bloodshot eye stared directly back at her. Her breath caught. She stepped away, then looked again. The hallway was empty. To Chiron, it was a victory. Her curiosity took control. She tore open the package and froze. Inside was a grotesque human face mask, and at its center, a perfectly sculpted nose. Exactly the one she had always wanted. She didn't hesitate. The moment she put it on, the prosthetic fused seamlessly to her skin. Instead of fear, joy overwhelmed her. Her flaw was gone. Compliments from co-workers poured in, lifting her into a euphoric high. But greed has no limit. Once perfection is tasted, moderation disappears. Soon, Chiron began stealing again. This time, she found a new package. Inside, a pair of glowing amber eyes. She implanted them without hesitation. With those eyes, her beauty became hypnotic. From that point on, she couldn't stop. She became addicted, obsessively stealing every mysterious delivery her neighbors received. To her, each package was another step closer to perfection, and she was willing to pay any price. To Chiron, stolen beauty had become the most precious treasure imaginable, finer than gold, rarer than diamonds. She grew careless, intoxicated by her reflection, no longer paying attention to the world beyond her mirror. That was when a voice suddenly whispered from behind the glass. Room 603. Correct. The word sent ice through her veins. Before she could react, thunderous knocking slammed against her door, dragging her back to reality. She told herself it was just guilt playing tricks on her mind. But the pounding only grew stronger, steady, deliberate, relentless. By now, Chiron had rehearsed her lies countless times. She assumed her neighbor would eventually give up and leave. But even the meek can snap when pushed far enough. This time, the knocking didn't stop. Heart racing, Chiron grabbed a heavy metal rod. In her distorted thinking, she wasn't the villain. She convinced herself she was the victim, that her neighbor was the aggressor. If this harassment continued, then she'd end it once and for all. Suddenly, the door burst open. The neighbor charged in, her face twisted with bottled rage. Chiron didn't retreat. The two women collided, grappling violently in a desperate struggle. When Chiron saw the neighbor reach for a spoon, clearly planning to pry the stolen beauty from her face, something inside her shattered. A surge of unnatural strength overtook her. With a feral scream, Chiron shoved the woman backward. The impact was fatal. There was no undoing what she'd done. Dragging the lifeless body into the bathroom, Chiron stood trembling. She had won the war to protect her beauty, but the victory cost her freedom and whatever remained of her humanity. Our third story follows a mother and daughter. The daughter, Suyun, was infamous at school for all the wrong reasons. She ranked dead last academically and showed zero interest in improving, preferring instead to run with the worst crowd she could find. Her mother, Hyojin, was consumed by anxiety. One day, she learned that the daughter of the neighborhood council head had placed first in the entire grade. The envy in Hyojin's eyes burned uncontrollably. Determined to push her own daughter into medical school, she swallowed her pride and sought out the woman responsible. At first, the councilwoman refused to explain, but after relentless pleading, she finally revealed the truth. Her daughter's success came from demons. Hyojin froze. She thought it was a cruel excuse, a ridiculous lie meant to hide some secret tutoring method. Offended, the councilwoman snapped back. It had taken courage to tell the truth, only to be mocked. That reaction changed everything. Hyojin began to believe. If demons could raise grades, then she didn't care what price she had to pay. Ghosts, curses, hellfire. Nothing mattered compared to her daughter's future. Using the address she'd been given, Hyojin arrived at a crumbling, abandoned building far from the city. On the way inside, she briefly glimpsed someone horribly injured, which made her hesitate. But ambition won. She needed to find room 414. That was the promise. Find it, and her daughter would be guaranteed admission to medical school. But no matter how many times she walked the hallway, room 414 didn't exist. Doubt crept in. Maybe the whole thing was a cruel prank. Then, without warning, room 414 appeared directly behind her. A freezing chill raced down her spine. Still, she reached for the handle. Whatever nightmare lay inside, she had no choice. The door slammed shut the moment she entered. The room was bleak, airless, suffocating. Lights flickered violently, gnawing at her nerves. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but after a brutal internal struggle, she opened a rusted cabinet door. Pure darkness stared back. Closing her eyes, she stepped inside. She didn't realize this was only the easiest part of the deal. After what felt like endless wandering, Hyojin finally reached the demon's domain. She remembered the warning. Keep your head down. Walk straight to the ghost market's altar. Even so, she nearly collapsed when a ghost bride suddenly materialized before her. To earn the Ghost King's approval, she was instructed to soak a snow-white silk pouch resting in a bronze basin with her own blood. As she did, a soul-piercing scream echoed through the chamber. The pouch darkened permanently, stained crimson. The blood loss was too severe. Hyojin collapsed. When she woke, she was back in the human world. Beside her lay the secret to her daughter's academic success. At home, she hid a ritual jar beneath Suyun's bed and stitched a sacred talisman onto her daughter's favorite doll. But deals like this have one absolute rule. That talisman must never fall off. If it does, the price collected will surpass even the worst nightmares. Blinded by improving grades and false hope, Hyojin never realized her desperate gamble had already sealed both their fates. Empowered by the talisman's sinister influence, Suyun's grades didn't merely improve, they exploded. Perfect scores became routine. Even her demeanor shifted, growing colder, sharper, almost unfamiliar. But as her success soared, the ghost market's appetite deepened, and the cost became unbearable. First, Hyojin was forced to pull out one of her own teeth as tribute. Then came the blood. Again and again, she had to soak the silk pouch in fresh crimson, draining herself until her body grew thin, pale, and fragile. Yet in her eyes, watching her daughter dominate every subject made every sacrifice worthwhile. That illusion didn't last. Suyun's sudden transformation drew attention. Classmates teased her, joking and crowding around. In the chaos, the unthinkable happened. The doll with the talisman slipped from someone's hands and struck the floor. The punishment was immediate. At home, as Hyojin prepared dinner, the knife slid unexpectedly, slicing deep into her palm. At that exact moment, Suyun's nose erupted with blood in her classroom. That night, Suyun collapsed. Hyojin rushed her to the hospital, but every test came back normal. There was nothing medically wrong with the girl. Ironically, it was the mother who alarmed the doctors. Seeing Hyojin's ghostly complexion and frail state, they urged her to get examined. She refused. This was the path she had chosen. But by nightfall, regret finally crushed her resolve. She wanted out. She wanted their old life back. She decided to break the deal, forgetting the one unbreakable law of the underworld. Once a contract is sealed, there is no escape. Her defiance enraged the Ghost King. A violent, unnatural wind tore through the house. As Hyojin tried to rise, the door slammed shut, trapping her inside. Then the horror escalated. The wound on her hand tore open as if clawed apart by something unseen. Blood sprayed violently across the room. At the same moment, punishment found Suyun. In the middle of her exam, a supernatural gust blasted the classroom doors wide open. Every student froze. Then, one by one, their bodies began to twitch, heads tilting upward, eyes vacant. Possession. Remembering a strange hand sign ritual she'd once seen online, Suyun shakily copied it. Through the narrow gap between her fingers, she saw the horrifying truth behind her classmates' convulsions. And worse, the entity noticed her. Screaming for her mother, Suyun ran. But contracts cannot be undone. Back at home, Hyojin took her final breath, drained dry by the price she tried to escape. Her obsession, mistaken for love, had doomed them both from the beginning.
There are no shortcuts in life.
Our fourth story follows a case so bizarre it shook the police force. Detective Kong Dong-sik was once its finest. A decorated veteran with countless commendations, he believed he'd seen everything. That confidence shattered after he went rogue during an operation, acting without a warrant or backup. The punishment that followed became a constant wound to his pride. He needed redemption. And the ghost market heard him. One day, Dongsik and his junior partner were assigned to track a robbery suspect. By sheer luck, or so they thought, they spotted the man on the street. Blinded by his desperation to close the case, Dongsik nearly drew his weapon on the spot. His partner stopped him just in time. The suspect vanished. Furious, Dongsik swore he'd catch the man no matter the cost. After days of obsession, he finally located the suspect's hideout. But once again, the same problem stood in his way.
No warrant.
Entering would destroy what remained of his career. His partner begged him to wait. But ambition had already devoured reason. Dongsik kicked the door open. They had no idea they'd stepped into a trap prepared by the ghost market itself. The entry fee for this deal was their lives. Inside, the house felt wrong.
No furniture. No personal belongings.
Only a single, withered tree blooming with ghostly white flowers stood at the center like an altar. Alarm bells finally rang. Dongsik ordered his partner to stay close as they moved deeper. What they found nearly broke them. Iron containers filled with human eyeballs and organs, arranged with sickening care. This wasn't a robbery. And as Dongsik stared at a table lined with countless cell phones, he finally understood. What Detective Dongsik had uncovered wasn't just a crime scene. It was a full-scale organ trafficking operation. Instead of fear, a disturbing surge of exhilaration rushed through him. If he dismantled an entire syndicate alone, he wouldn't simply regain his reputation. He'd become a legend within the force. Blinded by ego, he rejected his partner's desperate request to call for backup. This was his victory to claim. That decision sealed their fate. In a nearby aquarium, severed human fingers floated lifelessly at the bottom. Before the horror could fully sink in, a faint sound echoed from the next room. Expecting to find a hostage, Dongsik kicked the door open. The smell alone was overwhelming. On the bed lay a blood-soaked body. Furious, Dongsik ripped away the covering and froze. The corpse was the very suspect they had chased earlier that day. The timeline made no sense. The case had slipped beyond logic. Then another noise came from elsewhere. Running on raw adrenaline, Dongsik forced open another door. Inside was yet another mutilated body. In the sink, something unthinkable rested, a preserved human brain, displayed like a trophy. His junior partner broke. He stumbled outside, vomiting uncontrollably. But in doing so, he discovered the final, unforgivable horror. In a hidden room lay a young girl, still alive, her body slowly being overtaken by parasitic white flowers. Along the wall, surveillance monitors displayed live footage of the entire house. Every step they'd taken had been watched. The realization crushed Dongsik's delusions of glory. For the first time, he agreed to call for reinforcements. His life, and his partner's, mattered more than a hollow redemption. But the ghost market never waits. As they tried to leave, something monstrous burst from the darkness, attacking the junior officer. Dongsik swung his flashlight, finally revealing the creature's distorted form. He fired, but the bullets barely slowed it. The thing dragged his partner away. Dongsik followed the blood trail, only to witness a nightmare that would haunt his final moments. Fueled by rage, he fired again, forcing the creature to retreat. He gathered his partner and struggled toward the exit, whispering for him to stay conscious. But it was already over. Dongsik himself had been pierced by sharp, thorn-like growths during the struggle. His strength faded rapidly. Even as his vision darkened, he tried to pull his partner free. Then the man from the underworld market appeared. His presence alone confirmed the end. White flowers bloomed across the junior officer's wounds, the unmistakable mark of a completed deal. The department later honored both men as heroes. But the price of that glory was their lives. Our final story also involves law enforcement, but begins with a single college student. Meet Yuna. She was a Korean exchange student studying abroad in Vietnam. By night, she was an aspiring live streamer, desperate to stand out. But the internet was overflowing with influencers, and no matter how often she streamed, no one noticed her. She was invisible, and the ghost market heard her desperation. During a folklore lecture, her professor warned about spirits and taboos, stressing that even legends demand respect. He mentioned a forbidden site near campus, an abandoned lot rumored to be a gateway between worlds. The warning was meant to protect them. Yuna saw opportunity. She assembled a group of 3 and announced a live investigation of the curse site. The gamble worked. Viewers flooded in, daring them to cross the barbed fences and go deeper. Chasing numbers, they didn't notice a protective charm quietly slipping away behind them. Soon, the trio reached an old, dried-up. According to legend, the dried-up well before them was no ordinary pit. It was a gateway, the passage through which the souls of the dead crossed into the other side. Staring down into the endless darkness, Yuna felt no fear at all. If anything, she was disappointed. She wanted something to happen. A scream. A shadow. A viral moment that would finally push her stream into fame. One of her friends, who had dabbled in occult rituals, decided to show off. Laughing, he performed a crude ritual meant to reveal spirits by hanging upside down and peering between his legs. Yuna rolled her eyes. If they were going to do this, she'd do it properly. She introduced a far more famous Korean ritual, the fox's window. By intertwining the fingers in a precise shape and murmuring a chant, she explained, one could see beings hidden from human sight. Her friend Lana was immediately intrigued. She rushed to the edge of the well and formed the hand sign. The color drained from her face. Lana whispered that she could see something moving deep within the pit. Yuna laughed, assuming she was playing along. Then Lana went rigid. Her body stiffened, eyes locked forward, breath shallow. Panic erupted. It was clear Lana hadn't just seen something. Something had seen her back. The others tried pulling her away, but her body felt empty, weightless, like the person inside was already gone. Terror took over and they ran. What they didn't notice in the chaos was that Lana's face had already been violently damaged, as if something unseen had lashed out at her. Only after reaching safety did the truth sink in. Lana was gone, vanished without a trace. Crushed by guilt, Yuna became convinced her hunger for attention had caused it all. But she didn't realize that punishment had only begun. Later that night, the remaining friend, Dae, went to wash the blood from her hands in the restroom. As she turned to leave, a sound stopped her cold.
Drip, drip, drip.
She froze. Her body locked in place, muscles refusing to respond. Her hands began to move on their own, twisting into the fox's window gesture. In the mirror, her reflection no longer mirrored her. It watched her. The reflection gestured downward. On the floor, a pale shape crawled toward her. A cold hand wrapped around her ankle.
They screamed.
Students rushed in, but to them, the room looked normal.
No ghost.
No threat. Just a girl having a breakdown. Only Dae could see the bruised handprint burned into her skin. This was real. She knew then they were marked. Desperate for answers, Dae rewatched the live stream footage from the well. Pausing at the exact moment Lana used the fox's window, Dae copied the gesture. And finally she saw it. The true face of the entity. Horrified, Dae tried to warn Yuna the next morning, but she was too late. Refusing to accept what had happened, Dae forced her way into the crime scene and witnessed something so disturbing it fractured her mind permanently. The police dismissed her testimony as trauma-induced delusion. With no one left to trust, she turned to her folklore professor. His answer was chilling. To survive, she had to obtain a fragment of the spirit, its hair or a fingernail, and seal it inside a specific ceramic vessel. Only then could the curse be contained. Driven by desperation, Dae returned to the dried well. Hidden within a crack in the stone, she found it, the demon's fingernail. The moment she touched it, the world collapsed. When Dae opened her eyes, she was no longer in the human realm. She stood inside the underworld market. Terrified but remembering the professor's instructions, she forced herself forward toward the altar. That's when the truth revealed itself. This was never a ritual to seal the demon. It was a transaction. By following the steps, Dae had unknowingly completed a contract with the underworld market. Her soul wasn't saved. It was claimed. Dae was transformed, reborn as something else. A new resident of the underworld, stripped of humanity, and repurposed as bait, waiting for the next desperate person willing to trade their soul for desire. And so the cycle continues. The end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Ice sparkles.